Welcome to our monthly panel discussion. This is our second Business of Cannabis panel discussion of the year. Back for a return engagement as our moderator is Scott Rudder of the New Jersey CannaBusiness Association. Scott was named president of the board of directors of the New Jersey CannaBusiness Association in January of 2017. NJCBA is New Jersey's first and largest trade association focusing exclusively on developing and growing the cannabis industry in a sustainable and responsible manner. Scott is also a partner at Burton Trent Public Affairs, where he represents clients on a range of issues, including transportation, cannabis business strategies, entertainment, and energy. In addition, Scott is a former New Jersey state legislator and mayor with Fortune 100 corporate experience. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Rudder.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Woo! How about this place, right? You guys went through all the traffic and the storms to be here. 287 North was like shut down completely. Route 9 or Exit 9 had an accident. So thank you very much for coming. I'll tell you, I was here however many months ago. Since those applications, so those of you following the industry, real quick. So August 1st, RFAs, requests for applications, were released by the Murphy administration for 6 licenses. As a pregame to this, what they did is they said, okay, we're going to do a sort of an educational forum, educational seminar to teach people how to fill out these applications for 6 licenses. 800 people showed up. 800 people showed up for the opportunity for 6 licenses. When all was said and done, 106 teams submitted 146 applications for 6 licenses. The cost of going after those licenses varied team to team. I talked to one group. They spent less than $100,000. They felt very, very confident in their abilities and their skill sets. I talked to another group that spent $1.2 million. The intensity around the cannabis industry, not just in New Jersey, but across the United States, is significant. You're watching right now, you're seeing alcohol companies investing heavily into the cannabis space. You saw yesterday Coca-Cola announced that they're investigating opportunities in the cannabis space, in this case specifically CBD. The opportunities are out there, and what we're seeing is as the growth of the cannabis industry occurs across the United States, we're seeing positive things happen, or I guess depends on your perspective, but I'll give you one positive thing. Opioid use and opioid overdoses are being reduced across the board. Everywhere you have a robust cannabis industry in that state, opioid use goes down, overdoses go down. Another thing, and again, positive or negative depending on where you stand on the issue, alcohol sales are dropping. Last December, Aspen sold more cannabis than alcohol. Now remember, December's filled with holidays, it's wintertime, it's Aspen, it's fun, it's whatever. It sold more cannabis than alcohol, 15% more. So we're seeing these trends. We're seeing major Fortune 100 companies, these major industry partners getting in there. And we just saw a few months ago, the FDA just approved the very first cannabis-based medicine, CBD product. So that was from GW Pharmaceuticals. They're based in England. They have operations all over the country, all over the world, I mean. They have one medicine that was approved by our FDA, but they have 22 different medications out there across the world. Helping different issues, anxiety and whatnot. We're seeing the explosion in this market space. And one of the neat things I just found out the other day is that, so that company, GW Pharmaceuticals, they created it's for epilepsy with seizure disorders, Dravet syndrome specifically, which is very, very, very rare. And the FDA finally had to admit there are no other medical solutions. CBD is the one thing that's solving that issue, at least treating that issue. But GW Pharmaceuticals picked a New Jersey-based packaging company. I just found out the other day. So New Jersey is really the hotspot. And we saw that when 800 people showed up to learn how to fill out an application, and 146 applications went in for 6 licenses. So it's a really exciting time. I'm really happy that you're here. I'm going to give a quick update on legislative activities, and I'm going to introduce the panel. So where are we today legislatively? I have no idea. Quite frankly, I don't know, Bill, because I'm telling you, it is. You read the paper, you talk to people, you walk the halls of the State House. I'm very, very, very confident we have worked out 98% of the issues. Those couple little points, they're significant points. We're reading in the paper yesterday, there's a debate on the tax structure for cannabis, the adult use part of it. So in the adult use legislation, that is a big issue right now because there's one school of thought that says we should have a graduated tax, start at 10, go to 15, 20, and 25% over a course of years. Thought is, let's get in there softly. Let's make sure that we're achieving one of our main objectives, which is drying up the black market. So that's a thought process for having a reduced tax burden so that the legal market is very competitive with the black market. Another school of thought is, look, why do we want to have a graduated tax every year? We know we're going to get to 25%. If you look out west, you see tax rates at 42%, 37%. If we do it 25, we're already lower than our partners out west. Let's just do that one rate and stick with that and move forward. So, but the difference between the graduated rate and 25% is tens of millions of dollars. So it's not an idle conversation. It's something very significant, and the people that are involved in this are very passionate about their position. So hopefully we'll see in the next few days a solution to that, an agreement with that, but that remains to be seen. On the medical side, I think there's just general consensus across the board on the expansion of the medical program, some of the conditions that they're going to be doing and how they're going to be going about that process. So we're going to see New Jersey, hopefully in very short order, a very robust industry starting in 2019, moving forward. So let's all take advantage of that. So with that, I'm going to introduce my good friend Bill Caruso, a warrior in this battle. Bill.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Caruso. I'm Managing Director of Archer Public Affairs, subsidiary of Archer and Greiner. I'm also an attorney there, run their cannabis practice. Prior to that, I served in the legislature as a staffer, not as an elected official, but I worked with this gentleman who was there. I worked on the other side of the aisle, though.
Dramatically more authority than I had.
I don't know about that. But I had the pleasure of working for two speakers, the current Lieutenant Governor, Sheila Oliver, and Speaker Joe Roberts. I helped to write the state's first medical marijuana bill. I've worked on marijuana policy at the federal and state level for almost 20 years now, and happy to be outside of government now working in the private sector. And I also am the founding director of New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform, which is a racial and social justice organization, and also am a founding board member of the New Jersey Cannabis Industry Association.
Thank you, Bill. And Gary? George, Garcia?
I'm Jorge Garcia. I'm a partner at Connell Foley. I primarily work in the real estate development law over the past 20 years in North Jersey, in urban areas primarily. I'm co-chair of their cannabis practice group, and I focus primarily on guiding clients through the local processes when they're looking to identify locations. Because as the local rules in New Jersey and the home rules, it's very important to make sure you can identify a location to allow your business to thrive. So.
Thank you, George. Jim Minninger?
Good morning. Jim Minninger, Viridis Security Group. We're a security risk management company specific to the cannabis space. Anything from application development all the way through to boots on the ground. So we're kind of one-stop shopping. And I have to say I'm glad August is over after that craziness. So we hopefully helped a lot of clients out.
Awesome. And I'm going to try, right? Rosie Naumovski. Close?
Pretty close.
All right.
Naumovski. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. I'm from Illinois, actually, but the company I'm with is Treatment Solutions of New Jersey, and we are a minority-based business specializing in cultivation, and I actually have 2 dispensaries in Illinois. Illinois is about as regulated as I understand New Jersey is. So,
Hey, Rosie, could you move the microphone just a little closer?
Sorry. So, anyway, I'm here to talk about what we're experiencing and what we can actually bring to the folks here in New Jersey.
Awesome. Thank you. And Sandy Suchoff.
Hi, I'm Sandy Suchoff, CPA of the CannaCPAs. I formed the CPA practice in 1997 in response to an immediate family member's illness. I researched something. I was looking for a more holistic remedy, and stumbled upon cannabis and researched that extensively and decided to cater my CPA practice to the cannabis industry, and I've been doing that nationwide.
Awesome. Thank you, Sandy. All right, so we have a phenomenal panel of experts, and all of whom had did something else before the cannabis industry. So I really just want to go down the line here. So a lot of folks here are interested in the cannabis space. They're either directly involved or would like to be involved, and they have their own skill sets. They're engineers, they're accounting people, they're social media experts, they're in security themselves, or what have you. Your skills have all been in different categories prior to cannabis legalization in your states or in New Jersey as well. So Bill, starting with you. You're a government employee, rose up to the highest ranks. You're now a lobbyist. You're an attorney. Why did you get involved in this space?
Because we screw this up so many times and over here in our state. And not to sound megalomaniacal, but I kind of looked at an empty space. Governor Christie, who, by the way, I enjoyed working with. I worked with the governor in bipartisan ways, was here. This wasn't going to happen. And so in 2014, a long time ago, we're watching Colorado and other states in this experiment, and I decided to get together with a group of like-minded people and say, let's try to get something started in New Jersey. And I did it for this reason. A wise guy used to work for a United States congressman, used to coin the phrase that Wayne Gretzky used to say, be where the puck is going, right? We never do that in this state. We're always waiting and watching. So we decided, let's go be where we knew Governor Christie was never going to do this, but we got together with a group of folks, and we started looking at this from two different pathways: economic development and racial and social justice. And when you married both together, the racial and social justice part was missing in a lot of other jurisdictions. The other reason I did this is I'm a father of 3 boys. My sons are 12, 10, and 8. And I see this as many times as I can. I don't want my kids using drugs. I don't. Most parents don't want their kids using drugs. But I also saw parents that were struggling to get drugs to help their kids. And we had a broken law in New Jersey, and it was never going to get right by incrementally, touching it here, touching it there, going to beg the legislature to please allow this epileptic child to have the life-saving drugs that he or she needs. We saw parents fleeing out of state. So that was the motivation behind it. And I decided, hey, I'm a government guy. I'm now a lobbyist. I'm a lawyer. Let me put my money where my mouth is. And I actually put the firm's money where my mouth is. And God bless the firm for allowing me to go out in a very, very controversial space. The last thing I'll say on this, former colleague of his, a very good friend of mine, Majority Leader Lou Greenwald, who is somewhat of a mentor. He won't like that. We're more peer level. He called me when I made the first announcement that we were going to do this with New Jersey United for marijuana reform. This is in 2014. And he said to me, he goes, what are you doing? He goes, you're a young lawyer. You're throwing your entire life and your career away. I look at this room. I've looked at other rooms now. And by the way, I've since spoken with the majority leader who's been actively working to improve this law. I don't think anyone believes that anymore about this industry and what's to come. I think we now see what we're on the precipice of. We've seen the successes in other states. It's time for Jersey to do this, get ahead of the curve and do it right. And so I'm happy to be a part of this. I'm happy to work with guys like Scott and other people here on this board, on this panel. The time is right for us to finally capture something on the front end here in our state.
Amen. Amen.
Well, I want to echo what Bill's saying. I think it should be done right. I really got involved in this based on my experience guiding clients through redevelopment of urban areas. And I really think this industry is in line with how we can redevelop urban infill areas with social benefits. I think if we don't do this correctly, we're just missing an opportunity to carry on. For example, I do a lot of work in Jersey City. Over the last 20 years, we've billions of dollars of improvements along the waterfront. It's stemming into the inner parts of Jersey City, which still need a lot of redevelopment. I think this space and this industry, if done correctly, can promote incentives and economic development in those areas outside of just your typical real estate development, taking into account opportunity zones and the litany of things that the federal government has put out there. I think it's a great time to really focus on this space, not only from a money-making industry, but from a social and urban rebirth industry, as opposed to, again, I have 2 kids also, and the big concern is that I don't see marijuana as the gateway drug that a lot of people say it is. That's just not a reality. Your typical black market drug dealer will get you there and get you here. I think it's time for us to really be ahead of the 8 ball instead of behind it, because New York and other states are coming. So that's primarily why I got involved in this.
Jim?
I know Scott lives for this every time. My previous life, I was 22 years drug task force officer arresting folks for marijuana. And I'm waiting for stuff to come flying up here. There was a learning curve for me because for all those years, I did what I did, but saw the benefits of the medicinal piece of marijuana. I don't know if anybody knows the story of Heather Schuker and her daughter from Pennsylvania was very instrumental in getting that bill pushed. Seeing her daughter go through 70 plus seizures a week down to nothing or very few was just incredible to me. But I took what I learned from my law enforcement life, moved it to the private sector because of the regulatory compliance piece. We still want to protect our employees. We still want to protect the community. We still want to protect illegal diversion from getting out. So that's one thing that we really enjoy is the group that I work with is that keeping folks safe, keeping the product safe, and the community safe. And they're still looked at by some people as a subculture, an illegal subculture that work in this industry is breaking that barriers and for us to go out and talk with local law enforcement because we've been there, done that, shoot the dirt, and say, hey, it's going to be okay. This is not a bad thing coming into your community. So that networking aspect is great for us too. And we have legitimacy because we've been there and done that in our previous life. The folks that we work with.
Rosie?
So I love hearing stories about how former law enforcement officials are now in this space. It's really interesting for me to hear because on a daily basis I meet with patients, and mainly what they say is, I'm so happy to be legal now. And that says a lot. They don't have to no longer look over their shoulder. They're compliant. They abide by the rules. They understand the process as long as we provide good education to them, let them know the legal ramifications, what's allowed, what's not allowed. And I think when it comes to working with our patients, just for them to have that card says a lot. And we're moving forward. Every state is a little bit different, but I just think by allowing people access to alternative treatments is going to really help the industry. So with that being said, I think it's very important for minorities to participate. These are great opportunities in the region. Take advantage of those. Pool your resources. Get an excellent team on your side. When you're doing that, look at your SOPs. Make sure they're all compliant. And my recommendation is to make sure that you have somebody full-time on staff who is your bulldog, who enforces the rules. Because if the rules aren't enforced and if your employees make mistakes, that's what's going to leave a black mark on the industry.
Sandy?
So again, I got into this space, after researching cannabis and decided to combine my passion for the plant and my love and livelihood for tax and accounting. And my area of focus, obviously, who out here has not heard of 280E? Okay, so it seems, oh wow, okay, 1 or 2 people, okay. Well, to reiterate, 280E is a section of the Internal Revenue Code that says that there is no deduction or credit shall be permitted for any business that's involved in trafficking controlled substances within the meaning of Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 on the Controlled Substance Act. But there is kind of a technicality. Specifically, the tax court had ruled that within the definition of 280E, cost of goods sold is not applicable because it's deemed to be an adjustment to arriving at gross income. So what that means is that a cannabis touching entity can deduct cost of goods sold. And there's different code sections, but in a nutshell, it's things that are applicable to inventory. So what we do is try to utilize GAAP cost accrual accounting, because within the code section that enables a cannabis touching business in most instances to deduct more expenses that are applicable to cost of goods sold, and our focus is on that and compliance. And if I can give you the best word of advice is not only to get a knowledgeable accountant and bookkeeper, but also documentation. Because it's a heavy cash industry, everything should be substantiated, documented, and corroborated.
Absolutely. And you know, I didn't really get into it before, but I heard great stories here. So I'll just give you a little quick background on my thought process. You know, as a sitting state assemblyman in 2009, we had the very first debate and discussion on medical marijuana in New Jersey. And at the time, look, my background, I'm conservative Republican. I come from a conservative Republican area. I'm an Army veteran. I worked for Lockheed Martin, a defense contractor, as a business development executive there for 13 years. This is not something that I was overly familiar with as a subject. But during the course of that debate, you know, there's so many compelling arguments on the pro and con side of the debate. At the time, on the medical side, in 2009, we didn't have as much information as we have this year, last year, the following year, whatever. So, 2009 was a different era. In 2013, you touched upon, you know, the Wilson family. 2013 was transformational for me and a whole bunch of people. What medical marijuana is, medical cannabis. When you have a mom coming in who's really pleading to the governor and the state legislature, please, 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 my daughter's having 200 to 300 seizures a day, and CBD oil is the only thing that's going to resolve her of her pain, all those seizures. After she took CBD, as a side example, after she took CBD, I think she was like 3 weeks free of seizure-free after having several hundred a day. So as a legislator, as a father of 4, and it's 2013, I am at this point like, oh my goodness, why, who am I? Who am I as a legislator? Who am I as a politician to stand between a mother, daughter, and a doctor? So that was a very transformational moment for me and a whole bunch of other people, and why we're moving so much further down the path now that we have so much more information. The FDA is approving things. The International Olympic Committee is downgraded CBD, and it's, you know, all these things that we thought were awful are turning out not to come to fruition. And a big part of it's education. So the question I have for you guys is on education, on the community side of things, as businesses are, you know, all those groups that were out there this past August looking for property, looking for township approval. I mean, you would not have a completed application unless you had a letter from the township supporting you, or at least supporting the concept of your business being there, and a letter of commitment or intent or a purchase of a property as well. Everything else was going to be great. Without those two things, you would be incomplete. So community acceptance and education. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to start with Sandy, moving this way down, and Rosie and Sandy. So community acceptance, your company says Canna in the name. So is it professionally and community-wise?
Well, for me, it's a DBA name. I haven't had any problems yet, but I know there's a perception out there. I know from my clients, even in the hemp industry, you know, where it may be legal under certain circumstances, that certain banks, insurance, etc., payroll companies, for instance, ADP, Paychecks, and QuickBooks will not do the payroll for cannabis touching entities. So that's always a problem, and you know, something we have to work through. We all know about banking issues. As an ancillary business, I've not yet had any problems, but it's possible. And this is something that, unfortunately, at this current time, we are faced with, and hopefully we'll be done with this in the near future when, you know, certain legislation changes and as we get more broad acceptance across the lines. Did I answer your question?
Oh yeah, it was great.
Okay.
Community engagement is very important. I remember reaching out to the mayors groups and the chambers and talking with them. And actually, we were basically giving away our information in advance. We tried to limit, but we did try to limit the media just because it was proprietary in some regards. So we did want to make sure that we were good neighbors to the community, but we were also very open and honest about our intent and where we were coming from and our desire to bring product to market and to help people obtain medicine that was safe, packaged correctly, labeled correctly, and that was a key mission for what we tried to do in Illinois and in the other states as well. So community involvement is very, very important. And then once you're in the business too, don't forget to have those events where you hold fundraisers, or just last month during August, we did a Dog Days promotion where we gave to 3 no-kill shelters. Just generally, we had every patient, if they wanted to contribute. And then as a dispensary, we actually gave back some free product to those patients who actually donated some items. So we do believe the community needs to be involved. We hold festivals as well. This is kind of new for us because a lot of times people are a little bit apprehensive to coming to a closed door event, and festivals are basically a little bit more fun. People are more open, and so we provide education through those means. So just getting the word out about your program and how cannabis is helping people in the industry is worthwhile.
100%. Hey, Jim?
Public perception is huge. People don't know what they don't know. So with that being said, folks who, oh my gosh, there's a marijuana dispensary coming to my town, and the perception is Cheech and Chong, head shop. Seriously. And folks sitting here know that is not true. I mean, these dispensaries that we put together, they're like fine sheesh shops, they're unbelievable. And especially on the medicinal side, it's a medical suite, People are blown away when they see this. But without knowing that, you think you're going to walk in with somebody wearing tie-dye and, open the door and a cloud of smoke comes out. That's the perception. So that education piece is huge. On the front end of it, getting law enforcement on board, because the mayors, the heads of the townships and municipalities lean on the police, because what trouble is this going to bring to our town for this dispensary opening up? So there is that perception that there's going to be possibly higher crime rate. There's going to be vagrants coming in, people laying on this, the sidewalk stoned because of this dispensary. So to be able to come to an event like this where you have good folks sitting here wanting to do the right thing, intelligent, professional, changes that perception of the Cheech and Chong days. And that has to be hit early on, and meetings have to occur with the heads of the municipalities to change that perception. I will say one thing, that sometimes the professionals in the cannabis industry are our own worst enemies with some of the terminology we use, and that sometimes drives me nuts. Bud tenders. No, come on. We're here. I still haven't come up with a good word for it, but to try to change some of the terminology to professionalize the industry. So I think that sometimes we are our own worst enemies with that. And No, we're not selling pot. We're not selling weed. It's cannabis. Let's start to use some of the correct terminology across the board, just so that kills the old school perception.
That's spot on. I think perception is everything.
Yeah.
And I primarily focus on urban areas, and you'd be surprised on how much pushback you get from the communities that are most adversely impacted by the current status of the law. Your pastors, your legislators, the misconception about cannabis, specifically in those neighborhoods, it's nothing's going to change. Some people view it as putting a methadone clinic in my neighborhood from a zoning standpoint. And I think the community outreach is pivotal because Bill and I were in Las Vegas in February, I guess it was. And there's examples of Oakland, California, where they've actually made a model of rebuilding these communities through the cannabis industry, where they've taken raw urban areas and provided jobs and moved people to the next level. This, in my opinion, New Jersey, we're far from this type of engagement in certain communities. And it's critical that we have these stakeholders involved so they can actually see that this isn't an industry where you have drug dealers on the corner selling drugs. This is an industry that can be beneficial to the growth of not only an area, but the individuals in the area. So education and community involvement, like everything else in New Jersey, it's very localized. But once you have these charrettes and conversations with these groups, they really start to see that this just isn't, selling swag on the corner. It's really a business, not only just in the selling of the cannabis itself, but the retail component. It's a multiplier effect that can change a neighborhood. But that needs to be shown in a positive light to really take away the stigma of, it's just another drug dealer type concept. But,
yeah, Bill?
I think a lot of it has to do with knowing your audience, and any good communicator knows who they're speaking to and what messages to use. And I'll use for an example, I opened this in the discussion by saying the reason I got involved is because we generally screw this up in our state, and we got a bunch of laughs, not an uncommon view. Well, the folks you're speaking to in urban areas, the folks we're speaking to in suburban areas all around, mayors and business owners alike, believe that, right? This is New Jersey. We'll find a way to screw it up. So the benefit of what we're doing here in New Jersey is we're not doing this through a referendum. We're actually going to be one of the first, we will be the first state, I think, that will not only legalize through statute, through the legislature, but also create a market. Vermont legalized, but they didn't create a market. So what I think we've been able to do is marry two things, the communication side within the advocacy and implementation side. And so when you sit in a city and have a conversation, whether it's with a pastor or with the mayor, and they tell you, hey, we're going to get screwed here. They're not wrong, because they've had this happen time and time again. This isn't going to benefit their people. And it's not just reducing the 4-to-1 ratio in arrests that are affecting the minority communities that live in their areas. That's part of this, but that's not all of it. That's what we did in Colorado, but we didn't improve the standings. So Oakland, California is an example. I was smiling because I know some of the players in Oakland that got that city to get their operation right. There's a lot of good efforts that went on in sort of a symbiotic relationship between the local government and the state government to incentivize some things at the local level. But mayors are suspect of this here in our state because the money doesn't flow from Trenton down to the municipalities any longer. You look at energy tax receipts, you look at COA money, you look at all the different pots of money that have been promised to flow back, school funding for goodness sakes. It doesn't flow back out of Trenton at a fair rate, according to most folks. So what we've started to look at here is take those concerns and turn them into policy. One thing you're going to see in this bill, I'm almost certain of it now, is there's going to be a local options tax added into this. It's going to allow municipalities that house a cannabis facility inside the city limits, they're going to be able to tax it. They're going to be able to derive revenue direct to their town now, not pass through Trenton. That's a game changer. I think the other thing that we're also able to show to a lot of folks is this isn't just the business coming in with some out of state or out of county or out of city owner. This is the ability for your residents to not only be employees, but to be part of this structure, to be part of the corporate ownership of these new facilities. And again, that's dovetailing with the legislative side of this too. So he said racial and social justice and economic development go hand in hand. And I think that is actually the success story here that's going to come out of our state is we will get this bill done. It will come with a lot of add-ons on it that are going to improve the quality of this program going forward long term. It takes some time, it takes some effort, but that's the combination of the communication, the listening to all these different constituencies, and then the advocacy that's going on in Trenton.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting, the professionalism, the community engagement, the normalization, and of this industry. You're just seeing it across the board, and it's transformational, it's evolutionary. Jim, to your point, there's some terminology that are used that's somewhat outdated. But one of the things I hear about often when we talk about legalization dispensaries is the zombies in the streets and the crime's going to go up, and it's so counterintuitive. It's just so counterintuitive. You think about it. There are studies that show that when dispensaries go up, crime goes down in that area. Why is that? Dispensaries have a tremendous amount of security. Bad guys go away where there's a lot of security, whether it's a personnel or whether it's security cameras. Crime goes down around that immediate area. That's a statistical fact. So when we talk about professionalization and normalization of this as an industry, you get into regulations, and one of the biggest challenges we have on a regulatory scheme is banking. Right, so banking solutions are a challenge right now. I mean, I've talked to a bunch of online banking companies who are trying to come into New Jersey, and they offer sort of PayPal-esque solutions. I talked to one group. I won't get specific because it may be obvious, but some things are scary that they're offering as solutions, and some things are actually makes perfect sense. Brick and mortar banks are also a critical part of this, and you'll see some of them popping up here and there that they're willing to take on cannabis consumers, cannabis clients. What are you finding on a regulatory scheme and a regulatory perspective, and what are the biggest challenges regulatory-wise? We talk about 288E, so we can skip that, but regulatory-wise, we get into banking or other challenges. And let's start with Jim in the middle. Let's mix it up a little bit.
Wow.
All right, Jim, and go.
And go. The regulatory compliance piece can be a challenge, especially on, and I don't know the flavor of the audience right now if you're looking to get into the space or their ancillary businesses, but that's a huge component at the front end on the application development to hit all the key parts of regulation. And I'm going to go around your question here real quick and go off on a
answers, Jim.
Come on, Scott, you're killing me. The one piece is to get the subject matter experts on banking, on attorneys, on real estate, on security, on your team early, because you have the folks that want to open these facilities up, and you need to have a good team around you, just so the regulations are covered when you're developing these things. I can speak from experience. This last round with New Jersey, that was 30 days of craziness trying to get some of these applications together. And if anybody was a part of it, they know what I'm talking about. That came out of shouldn't say it came out of nowhere, but pretty much came out of nowhere. And we had people scrambling 1 week to go and still didn't have real estate yet. And you can attest to this, George. It was insane because now we have to do a whole security plan on a building that's not there, and you don't know what the floor plan's like. And yeah, it was some long nights. So with the upcoming rounds, start now. Gather your team and start planning, because you don't want to do that 30-day hustle again. Or it's going to happen, but build often and build early. With the subject matter experts within the banking field, within the real estate field, your attorneys, and put the best product forward that you can get.
Rosie, you're an operator. What challenge do you have on banking?
It's a big challenge, actually. when we started out, we had a bank, and we had them for about a year, and they said, well, I didn't know you were going to have this much cash. And we're like, yes, we are a cash business. So after a while, I guess they got a little tired of all of the reporting. So now some of the banks, Illinois did lose a main bank a few months ago. And so we were all kind of scammering around just to find another few banks that would maybe consider taking us on with the federal legislation, that announcement that Jeff Sessions had made this spring. So that was an impact for us. When we structured our business, real estate was basically separate. And so that kind of allowed us to pay some things differently out of real estate accounts, and we were successful with that. But it is still an issue. It is a cash issue. It's a safety issue. We do have our Illinois treasurer on board, and he's trying to work with the financial institutions in Illinois, but the FinCEN laws are still there, and it's not real clear to a lot of the regulators. I will say from a personal standpoint, the underwriters do look at where your paycheck comes from, and that's a consideration as well. So hopefully down the road, banks will become a little bit more receptive to this industry. Forbes magazine, and this is my specialty, was workforce development and economic development in the past. And I was really enlightened by Forbes magazine saying that the cannabis industry is going to outweigh manufacturing when it comes to jobs. And that's pretty amazing. So hopefully these banks will come on board and we'll be able to have credit cards handled in a different format, in a safe format, and not have to handle so much cash. So hopefully.
Sandy, how do you advise clients?
Yeah, so this is a big problem, and a problem for us as accountants. There are times where, like Rosie said, you have bank accounts. Sometimes they get shut down and they open another bank account. A lot of people resourcefully try to utilize other entities such as management companies, real estate holding companies. On that note, it could work. It could facilitate, some transactions, through those checking accounts. But be aware that those entities you set up have to have a profit-oriented purpose and be sustainable and be able to stand on its own two legs, or else the IRS may deem it to be, just part of the cannabis touching entity and disallow a lot of those expenses. So you have to be very careful in your planning and implementation of those type of businesses, but it is a workaround. There are a lot of companies I know I'm approached probably on a daily basis from these alternatives. Some are clearly money laundering operations, and some, on the other hand, may be feasible alternative solutions. For instance, I spoke with someone the other day. We haven't really elaborated on it, but he does have a virtual bank that you utilize your own Brinks trucks and you bring your money to the nearest Federal Reserve Bank, and they charge transactional fees. These transactional fees can be anywhere between 2 and 5% of your deposits. So I guess a little bit more substantial than a credit card, but obviously not deductible as well. And if you are operating within a cash environment, my advice is to reconcile your cash on a daily basis. Count it, just like, you contemporaneously count your physical inventory. Do the same for your cash.
George, you're from a real estate perspective, and all the banking needs to go. You're working with clients, I'm sure this last round, and what's going on? How are you dealing with the banking solution when you're talking about real estate? What solutions in the real estate world are there?
Well, the banking situation, there's uncertainty. The bigger the bank, the bigger the regulation. When you get to SEC regulations and compliance issues with funds, so the banking issue is an issue. The real estate, in my opinion, should be a bifurcated part of the business itself. There are unique ways you can handle the real estate once you've identified it, to sort of shift it away from the burdens of the regulations from the Internal Revenue Code side, from having a bank, a big bank, from being able to take your receipts. Because at the end of the day, I think the biggest problem for the bigger banks is the uncertainty. Mm-hmm. That they can wake up one day and they can say your reserve funds are going to be slashed by X amount of money. I'm not a big fan of crypto or cyber currencies. We're not sure yet where they're going. Yeah. The volatility is so volatile in these markets.
That's outrageous.
That it is outrageous. But the real estate play in this space can be uniquely crafted, where you can utilize it to have some tax benefits and some banking side benefits through net leases. REITs, again, if once I go to the realm that I have to do regulation,
the real estate investment trust.
Yeah, the real estate investment trust are vehicles that typically own real estate. So you have private REITs, public REITs. The public REITs, again, they're very governed by the SEC. I think the future here is when the opportunity funds really take off under Cory Booker's legislation 14Z71, which we've been working on. An opportunity fund essentially allows corporations or institutions to invest capital gains into a fund that invests the money into opportunity zones, which have been identified and certified by the Internal Revenue Service as of today. It's a big investment play because you defer your capital gains tax, plus you get a rate of return. So your internal rates of return can end up being anywhere between 17 to 32% of your net investment. But I think those are the vehicles you're going to see as it relates to the real estate play, because real estate you can own in many different ways. You do a triple net lease to the operator, and that way that part of the business, it's just an independent part of the business altogether. But I will tell you, as the industry advances, I have spoken to clients and have some real estate partners who will see holistic type malls or REITs that specialize in this type of space, which is, for example, in New Jersey, we have all these strip malls. So imagine a strip mall that's fully holistic. You have your medicinal marijuana, your adult use, you have a treatment spa. So, I mean, I'm very optimistic, and so is the real estate industry, about doing different things in this space.
Yeah, and what's going on at the federal level is going to be game changing, right? So there's something called the States Act, and Bill, I'm going to ask you this question. So States Act was something where we have a conservative Republican and a liberal Democrat who sponsor legislation, and it's endorsed by the Trump administration that could be game changing. Bill, what are your thoughts on where that is?
Well, I mean, take a bigger step out. You can't get Congress right now to agree. Today's Tuesday, okay? And you know,
it's always the optimistic.
Well, but this has been the problem down in D.C. And this year, I mean, one of the problems that goes on with banking is it is starting to relax a little bit, but you're going to pay for it, right? I mean, there's so one of our panelists said that the bank came back and said, "Oh, this is really hard." It is. There's a lot of compliance issues, but you can pay for that, and then that either adds to your cost of business or adds to your product. What's starting to change, though, is down at the federal level. In January, when Sessions made his move against the Cole memo, everybody paused. You and I were on the phone that day, and everybody paused. We're like, well, what does this mean, right? And you know what? The next day, everybody woke up and kept moving. And I don't know that I've ever seen such exponential change occurring in any industry. I mean, we had a major announcement yesterday about wind, offshore wind in New Jersey, and that industry is actually blooming, but not at the rate this industry is moving. And so you're seeing this happen, and I think at the congressional level, to go to Scott's question, we actually see bipartisan work happening. Conservative members and liberal members coming together. You mentioned Cory Booker. We've seen the president actually agree for a minute, I think.
Yeah, which made me a little nervous.
There was some tweet I saw. But this is happening. And so what we have coming up right now is going to be a very interesting election. Nothing will happen before November, but we have a change election coming in November. And it will be interesting to see, particularly if we have a Democrat-controlled House. I don't think we have a chance of having a Democrat-controlled Senate. But I think you're going to see legislation move, perhaps right after the first of this year, at the federal level. Veterans, medicinal expansion, recognition. I do think you're going to see something along the lines of the States Act, and maybe not the exact bill, but components of that. But I think you're going to absolutely see a nod to streamlining banking and investment coming out of the federal government. That's going to happen. But we're within a year, 2 years of something happening in that space. Maybe not on legal rec, but certainly on the medicinal side.
What about so the Farm Act, right? So there is Senator Mitch McConnell, Majority Leader in the United States Senate, sponsored hemp legalization effort to be part of the Farm Act. That's a whole different. That's a game changer in and of itself. It is right now a controlled dangerous substance. In certain definitions, and other definitions, it can move freely about the country. The Farm Act, though, by legalizing, regulating hemp, will have an impact potentially on the cannabis space. Bill, do you have any thoughts on where that is and how that might be going? Because honestly, that to me, if you look at hemp and cannabis, that to me is a major game changer. That whole market space and how it may push the cannabis discussion.
I think it is in this sense because there's a lot of folks that don't understand the difference between it that serve in government, so that might help us in that sense. And like, oh, you approved hemp, why don't you do this too? But I think more than likely what you're going to see is two different spaces in the hemp space. There's an agricultural side of the hemp space that I think for building products and other, for textile materials and things of that nature, you're going to see a hemp explosion. But I'm also concerned in the unregulated CBD market.
Oh, for sure.
This exploded overnight. I mean, you can go to Wegmans now and buy CBD-infused soda. You can buy it on Amazon. I think you're going to actually see some crackdown on the CBD market, and that may come in the context of a hemp bill.
Yeah, you will find, and I won't mention any specific countries, but hemp is being grown at mass levels of different countries, and hemp is also this great plant that you can use to clean up contaminated sites.
Yep.
And so what you're finding is certain countries are using hemp to grow on top of these contaminated sites, then turning that hemp around and becoming a CBD oil that they ship to the United States. Something to be concerned about. So when you're looking at your CBD product, look for what the sourcing where the CBD is sourced from. It's very important for your health. All right, so I'm going to take a moment, and I'd love to open it up to questions to the audience. I think we've all asked enough questions. I know you guys have a ton. Starting with Gary Rosen. No, I'm just kidding, Gary. You can look at your phone.
This is for you. It's an advertising agency, and they're representing a cannabis-related company doing advertising, but they're not touching the plant. And their concern is the money they're receiving from this from this client is subject to the cannabis regulations. How would you treat that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and a lot of people have similar concerns, but no, that they're not a cannabis touching entity. They're not trafficking a controlled substance on Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. So the answer is no, they are not. And sometimes there are fine lines, and people call me and they say, well, my attorney said, and they're from Colorado, where you would think it would be so well known, and they are in fact cannabis touching, like delivery and things of that nature, brokering. But in this indigenous situation as an ancillary business, no. That being said, what we discussed prior, they may still have difficulties, posting certain things on social media, Facebook, Google, advertisements, banking, and things like that in certain situations. But no, they're not subject to 280.
Questions?
Hi, I'm Liesl Jones. I'm the Dean of STEM at Union County College. And we are looking to put together a medicinal cannabis program. However, we run into the problem of that we're a public university. And we are looking to understand whether or not federal financial aid dollars can be used for students that would participate in this program.
I'm not an attorney, but I would think not. Because it is illegal at the federal level, despite the legality at the state level. So I would think to use any federal funds for an illegal federal activity would be unacceptable, to say the least.
You have some pioneers out there that are also in the similar space that you're in, but it's one that you should proceed with immense caution. And not to, I am an attorney, not an attorney for this purpose today, and certainly not going to give you legal advice from a panel, but I don't know that it's an absolute no, but you really, there's more political issues around this, I think, than legal ones too, that you have to surround yourself around. But there are ways to do it, and you guys are not alone right now. There are other higher ed institutions that are looking at this.
I agree, Bill. It's more political than legal at this point.
Definitely. And there are internship programs as well, too. So there is one major university that has an internship program where they have folks go to some of the dispensaries in New Jersey. So it's not a direct curriculum, but it is an internship.
I would say in Illinois that we actually reached out to our community college board at the state level to see about credentialing our employees. I do think that you'll see that eventually, similar to pharmacy techs, that although we don't call them bud tenders, we call them patient advisors. We would like to see some credentialing and some certification and absolutely training when it comes to our staff and giving good knowledge regarding cannabis usage. So we did not get turned away, but that is at the state level. So.
Hi. Good morning. My name is Arun Kulkarni. I'm from Pharmax Group Incorporated, a pharmaceutical testing company. One of my questions regarding the testing and standardization of experience based upon Colorado, California, and other states where marijuana and cannabis is legal. Are there any efforts performed for harmonization of the standards for testing?
Sure.
Yeah. We have a broken system here right now. We have a state statute from 2009. By the way, I also did say I helped to write this, so I'm criticizing it, but that mandates that the state test our dispensaries right now, the grow facilities. We're growing that effort at a significant rate. We're not going to be able to keep up. So one of the things I think you're going to see in this new legislation coming down is going to be private lab testing. The governor doesn't have the statutory authority right now to allow that, but we have a backlog in our state lab. With 6 dispensaries that are operating in the last decade, less than a decade, it wasn't as obvious. It's becoming a problem. So I think you're going to see 2 things. To answer your other question, yes, we will adopt standards similar to what you've seen in other states. One of the benefits Jersey has right now is we can pick off like a menu, like this, we like that. We've seen what other states are doing. And there have been some controversies around this. There's actually an article out I read last night from California's been having some problems because they've just adopted new standards and getting everybody up to speed. But you will see rigorous standards here in the new legislation that's adopted, and you will see private labs now coming into the space and licenses being offered by the state for private lab testing as well.
That's a critical part of any professional industry, and absolutely, and what you see in some of the other states, and California's doing things in reverse. It created a law, now they're creating regulations, and that's being very disruptive in the market. But one of the positives that come out of that, you're seeing in some of the other states on the third-party testing, is not when we're not, so a lot of places are, the challenge for third-party testing is they want to look at, whether you got bacteria, fungus, you have pesticides, that kind of a thing. But what also a lot of these third-party testing organizations are doing is they're almost consulting, if you will, and they're basically, you want a higher THC rating, you can give money over into this pocket. That can't happen in New Jersey. That's not okay here. We need to have those professional standards and strictly regulated standards. Absolutely. Who's right here?
Hello, my name's Ian, prospective dispensary owner. So my question is, we're currently in kind of a pre-legalization, current legalization stage. Going forward, after legalization happens, whether it be for rec or expansion of medical, what do you feel the post-legalization culture and landscape will look like? And how should you kind of plan and direct your business to fit that?
Post-legalization culture, and what will it look like? So what are we going to look like as a state after we legalize? So in 5 years, how about that? 5 years, what do we look like?
In my opinion, I think this will ultimately become like the liquor and alcohol business. There'll be bars, it'll be regulated, you'll have distributors, you'll have retail spaces, I think you'll have franchises, like coffee shops. I really don't see why this cannot, at the end of the day, be parallel to what we have today in the tobacco and alcohol industry outside of tobacco. You'll have regulations about having, like we have now, 750 feet from a school, you can't open a bar, you have to have a restaurant. So there'll be regulation, there'll be local rule. But I think if the adult piece is rolled out correctly, and Bill and Scott, they've been working diligently to make this a reality.
Don't blame us.
I think it's
it was all Bill. I just got here.
I think it's another great. It's just another economic development tool for the state. It's entertainment. If regulated correctly and operated correctly, there should be no reason why this space would not end up being like your typical bar, restaurant, entertainment space, in my opinion.
I think we're going to have something a little different than what we've seen in other jurisdictions. At least I hope. I think you have two. I think you have one good, one bad. I hope in 5 years we're going to be building into a research economy here, not just legal rec programs, and that's fine. That'll be good, and not just medicinal, but we're going to actually tie in to some of the finest research universities and finest medical facilities in all the land. And when you are able to merge those things in, you're going to see significant job growth. I mean, real high-paying jobs in research and development, not just on the pharma side, but also on the agriculture side. Rutgers University has one of the finest agriculture programs in all the country. So I think you could see that coming too, and that's different than what we're talking about now. The other thing I think you're going to see, though, across the country, particularly if we see this work at the federal level, is consolidation. Guys, we're in a really, really densely populated state with high labor costs and high real estate costs. Growing cultivation is probably not long for this world once the walls of interstate commerce break down. The federal government says, hey, you can transport from Kentucky and Arizona and other places. I think you're going to see a lot of our cultivation facilities migrate south and west. But you will still have the retail and processing and hopefully this research component still here. That's, I think, the future of this Jersey economy. I think that's a better economy for us long-term too. But that's going to take work, and that's going to take cultivation, no pun intended, from our governmental leaders to make sure that's where we're moving.
I think, too, with that, when we talk about the cultivation, that is a struggle, right? So, when we're looking at these very large facilities, you want to do that now. You want to provide that product, that service today. But you are looking at the tea leaves. Things are going to shift, and the market will change, and you're going to have to change like any other industry. You're going to adapt with that. But I think one of the things you'll see is that sort of that craft beer sort of equivalent, that for those smaller cultivators who remain here, to have that specialty and make it special. You're also looking at, from a consumer trend perspective, and Ian, I know you know this, flower, the buds, cannabis, the flower part of it, that's changing a lot too. You look at consumer trends, and it's going right into the edibles market. When I talk about edibles, I mean the whole universe. So it's drinks, it's lotions, it's oils, it's a whole bunch of other things. Consumers want to be, whether they're from a healthy perspective, they don't want to ingest smoke, or they want to be more discreet, or whatever the reason is. They're looking for other things. So the products, they're always going to need a place to sell it. The dispensaries, retail locations, and you're always going to need processors in this area. So those things will be a long game, and then I think you'll see the shift to more of the larger scale, 100,000 plus square foot, to more of the craft side of it as well.
How are we doing? Pat Harity, McCarter in English. Jim, you had touched on it a little bit. I know that we're anticipating a new RFA on the horizon at some point. I was wondering if anybody could talk about the timeline of that And then secondly, would it be for another vertically integrated license, or would we see the breakout of the 3 separate licenses for the next RFA?
The next round of licenses?
Right.
All things being equal, right?
So here's where I think we are. First of all, for those that thought the last round was a surprise, it was. The governor did his EO in March. The program expanded by patients in absurd capacity. I mean, just unbelievable response to how many people were waiting. And they ran into a supply problem. This was also not intended because they thought they'd have the legislation done by June and then be able to work through some of these things. So this is the last time you're going to see vertically integrated licenses offered from the state. You'll be able to combine licenses later. I think there's going to be a prohibition period of probably 12 to 18 months, but you will be able to combine and create a vertically integrated operation later. The next round of licenses is a little bit different to pinpoint because there's some things that we can do without statutory change and there's some things we can't. There's a debate right now on whether the governor could allow for home delivery. There's some that view he can, there's some that view he can't. There is a debate right now whether until the regulations, which will come the end of this month, beginning of next, are finalized, whether he can break apart these licenses to offer smaller licenses, the individual cultivation, individual retail, individual processing. I think the administration intends at some point in time before the end of this year to issue new licenses. I don't know that it's rock solid yet, but I think that their plan is to do something to that extent. But I also think that's going to tie into what happens with this legislation. If the legislation moves in the next couple weeks to the governor's desk, that might change the view, particularly if they're authorizing things like consumption spaces, which is not allowed in the current legislation. If they're authorizing lab testing, third-party lab testing, which is not allowed in the current statute, and probably allowing some form of home delivery, again, overtly in the statute rather than lawyers parsing through language to see if it is. So we're due for awards from the first RFA that went out sometime between November and December. I think you're going to probably see this after Thanksgiving, not before, just the way government works. So then at some period of time between December 1, end of the year, maybe bleeding into the next year, you could be poised for another round of licenses. But what those are really depends on a lot of things that are going to happen in the next couple of weeks.
Bill, you mentioned a little bit earlier the clinical research end of things. Are we going to see a specific clinical research license tied in with the university at some point?
The drafts that I've been privy to right now do contemplate what we'll call smaller licenses, particularly on the cultivation side, that would be attached to those. But, some of that's going to, I think, bear out more on the reg side than it is you can't write everything in a statute. Sure. And some of this, you really do need written into the regs. And there is going to be a commission that's going to be formed that will be populated in perpetuity to kind of manage these things, and I think they can get at that. But I think there's an incentive right now when you look sort of north, central, and south to marry up some of the phenomenal research centers on the higher ed and medical side with some licensees. I think you may see some carve-outs there.
Yeah. With that being said, do you see those clinical research licenses or those marriages hurting the other cultivation groups because now there's research behind the strains and the efficacies of the product, and Joe's cultivation facility isn't as good because doesn't have that.
No, I think, and in my experience, I think you have two different type of markets. You have a medicinal market that there are folks. I mean, listen, I'm going to out her right now. My mother doesn't like the fact that I'm sitting on this panel right now. My mother doesn't like the fact that I've been involved in this, but I have a profound story. She called me the other day, a family friend of ours had a back injury, was taking some opioids, and she advised that person not to do it, to go get medical marijuana. I said, my work is done here.
Nice.
But I think there are population out there that will be intrigued by the research component to this, that will be moved into that. And by the way, we'll be developing more advanced drugs derivative of cannabis that will help treat a lot of different ailments. But there's a legal rec user that probably doesn't care about that. And I think there's two different paths.
Gotcha. And I think that's where you're going to see again once we open up the aperture, and we're going to have Kentucky growing it on millions of acres and exporting it all over the country. The things that will stay here, the craft brew thing that I mentioned earlier, but also the pharmaceutically grade, the FDA standards for grow facilities, where people don't actually ever touch the plant itself because it's grown in such a clean area.
Hi, my name is Connie Pascal, and I actually am a researcher in cannabis. Oh, there it is.
Start from the beginning. Thank you.
My name is Connie Pascal, and I'm a researcher in information science, and I'm doing my dissertation on the information practices of cannabis nurses. And yes, there are actually people out there that call themselves cannabis nurses. And I can assure you that this took a really long time to get my dissertation topic cleared through Rutgers. And what we're really missing, I love this idea that there is going to be a research future, but we need funding now. We need funding. Is there a way that the New Jersey cannabis business community can somehow start to raise funds for research before all this, money starts to pour in from the government, which is going to be many years ago? So if you really want a clinical research, and clinical research just isn't about drug testing, it's about many, many other things that you do research in. Is there a way that the business community can start to support this research effort now and not later?
I'll take a quick stab at it, but I think the challenge you have right now at this moment in time is there's 6 operators in New Jersey, and they're all nonprofit organizations. I think you'll see that sort of cross collaboration as the industry progresses, both on the medicinal side and the adult use side, as far as this is where the revenue is going to be generated from. But on the medicinal side specifically, as we were saying, that's going to shift dramatically. We have Ken Walski, who is, Ken, right? So Ken, talk about why we're all here today. It's guys like Ken Walski with the Coalition of Medical Marijuana in New Jersey who really set the standard, and they've been advocating for 20 years. Bill's been at it for a long time. I showed up a couple of years ago. Ken Walski and his team have been doing this for decades. So they've done an amazing job. But the challenge we have from private sector investment is that there's only 6 operational businesses in New Jersey, and they're nonprofit. So I think you'll see that collaboration as the industry increases.
Good afternoon. Good morning. My name is J.P. Powell, and I have a private business called For You Only. We've gotten a lot of valuable information today, but for those of us who are interested or new, what will the process be like once legislation is passed? What will the exact process be in terms of applying for or obtaining a license and thereafter?
I think what we were talking about, Bill, if you want to repeat it.
Before you do anything, before you worry about the process, and tell everybody in the room, particularly if you're starting out in this effort, you need to figure out 2 things right now. What do you want to be and where do you want to be? Because if you want to be a cultivator, you need to figure out, do you have experience being a cultivator? Do you know how to grow cannabis? Not tomatoes, not peppers, cannabis. If you want to be a retailer, do you have experience? Not that you owned a scarf shop on Main Street. Do you have experience in being a retailer in cannabis? You can learn this stuff and you can be there. And that's the good part. You got a little bit of time right now to kind of get yourself up to speed, learn, be knowledgeable about this. The where do you want to be part is also important, though. Every one of us here have some relationship in our home community or in communities around it. It's important that if you have those relationships, you utilize them and start talking to your local government officials about this. If you know of a real estate availability, you should also try to investigate that too. Because when the next round comes down, you will be sitting in a very significant spot. You know what you want to be, and you already have decided where you want to be and have done some of that work. And as we were just talking about, that's half the battle. Someone may come find you and want to partner with you, even though you really haven't done much of anything yet other than those 2 things. You may then be well suited to go and apply for an application. You've already locked up land and you have approvals from your town, at least, a back and forth conversation with your mayor. So before we even get to when these next licenses are going to come down, that's what I would be doing. Now, the last round of licenses had a $20,000 fee attached to it, 18 of which was refundable. and a variety of different significant issues. But had you chosen to sit and do it yourself, you could have. You could have muddled through and done it. But other people, like Scott said, there are people that spent millions of dollars, people spent thousands of dollars on this. But I think at the very least, you're going to have to come up with an application fee. They may have small, I'm seeing some discussion about smaller fees, maybe a tiered system in the next round. But the last round had at least a requirement of a $20,000 fee for the application.
So that's what I saw this round. You need to have a big, it's a business. You should have a business plan. There's a difference between being vertical, if you want to just be a dispensary, which is a retailer. I saw a lot of it. I represent going concerns now, which have different demands and issues than people applying for the license. But you really need to figure out, what the business model you're looking at, because if you're in urban areas, you really need to figure out where you're going to find the piece of real estate to begin with. By the time there's a lot of interest in Hudson, in the northern region, Hudson County, Hoboken, Jersey City. Everyone wants to be there, but no one's done a 1,000-foot analysis to figure out that there's only maybe 10 locations where you can put the activity you're looking for. You might not be Hoboken or Jersey City because you have your churches, synagogues, and schools. So you need to identify where you want to be. The last round, I saw people who were looking at a million different things and just weren't focused. So I agree with Bill. It's you need to have a business plan and figure out where your forte is. And I did have some individuals who just partnered up on the application with outfits that have that are familiar to the space and have the capital wherewithal to apply for these applications. And it can be expensive, and the fees and filing fees are expensive. But so there's a litany of things before we even try to figure out what these new rounds are going to look like, how these licenses, what are we applying for, how many are there going to be, the north, south regions. I think it's important to figure out what the business is going to be before you go into it.
Do you, and let me just, I'm sorry, I'm going to take that conversation with you guys, the setback issue, right? So that was a big challenge, and the Assistant Commissioner, Jeff Brown, announced that big symposium where 800 people showed up, mentioned that the only thing they're really going to focus on at this moment is drug-free schools. A lot of people are also operating under the assumption that, well, we worry about other community things, daycare facilities and whatnot. I'm going to be a little bit facetious, but not really. Are there requirements for this type of setbacks for like a CVS or a Rite Aid or a Walgreens in these same towns and municipalities? I mean,
from a local standpoint, we don't have them. So, for example, the biggest restriction you have in every municipality is your location from schools. So you can open a CVS anywhere. You can't open a bar or restaurant within 750 feet from a school. Right. When you're dealing in urban areas, when you look at the schools themselves, the 1,000 feet can be
designed
massive.
That's what the city's. Yeah.
Plus, there's a shortage of land in some urban areas where developers are building on parking garages. So to answer your question, no, from a local zoning standpoint, your regular pharmacy, CVS, Walgreens, your mom and pop shop, a pharmacy doesn't have a restriction to be next to it.
I guess that's my point, because the reality is there's far more dangerous substance than any CVS.
Absolutely.
We don't have the same restrictions, the same security requirements. Someone could jump across that counter and grab a whole bunch of opioids, run away, sell it, and die, right? You can't have that happen in the cannabis industry. You can't get into the retail side of the cannabis facility until you've already proven that you're 21. My daughter, who's 15 years old, could walk into a liquor store, buy a bottle of Pepsi and a bag of chips, and walk out. She can't get step one into a cannabis space. So I think that's a major distinction. I'm getting a little frustrated, but it's
Can we just jump back into this?
Sure.
This lady's question's, I think, really important in this context. So somebody asked me, the deputy commissioner took away this requirement on the churches, and I said to them, okay, what does that mean to you? They're like, well, we don't have to worry about churches anymore. I said, well, yeah, you do. Because if that church that you're going to open up adjacent to is against what you're doing, I guarantee you the mayor isn't going to allow you to go, and certainly not going to write a letter in support. But conversely, let's say that you're a member of the church or the member of the synagogue, and you go and reach out to the pastor or to the rabbi and say, I'd like to be involved in this. I've been a member of this church. I've been a member of the synagogue for all my life. This is important to me. This is important to the community. You might be able to change the view. You become an agent of change. And that's why I said the local part of this, and you've said this too, becomes almost the more important part than what's happening at the licensure level. And you can affect it. It's more political than it is legal.
It's political and it's education. Rosie, what were your experiences in setting up shop in Illinois?
Like I said, we wanted to be good neighbors, so we did reach out to the churches. We were actually in a small little area right off the main highway. We had to actually build our dispensaries from the ground up, but our neighbor is a church, and they were welcoming. And I invited everybody before we actually had product in our stores from the public. We invited law enforcement, fire departments to come and see our facility, check it out. We had that ability, just there was a short time frame of where we could invite people from the public, and we invited everybody in, and we really didn't have that much pushback. But I think if you willingly go to them, like I said earlier, and you explain to them what your plans are, I think you're doing your due diligence, and they appear to be a little bit more receptive.
I always have a thing I tell my real estate development clients. Proactive is better than reactive.
100%.
The worst thing you can do is get into a situation where you have identified something and not engaged anyone and spent a lot of time, effort, and economic wherewithal to find out that you're going to get pushback, and then you have to be reactionary. That's only going to cost you time and money. So at the outset, it's being proactive, in my opinion, is the best thing you do at the beginning.
Good morning. My name is Christopher Garibian, and I head up the cannabis law department at my firm, Weiner Law Group. And the question is for Jim. Jim, you talked about the perception of this Cheech and Chong dispensary type problem, really, for a lot of people. On the roads, law enforcement, when I'm speaking to police officers and other people, they're telling me that there is an issue with finding out whether the drivers are using cannabis. Is there any science or any products that are out there that may be comparable to a breathalyzer for cannabis? And secondarily, what are the statistics nationwide on the increase and or decrease and or no movement of accidents in other states where there's recreational and medical cannabis allowance?
Can you repeat that second part of that question?
Sure. Talking about accidents in other states
accidents
where there is medical and recreational adult use allowed.
Yeah. First question with the breathalyzer. Right now, there is nothing. I was speaking with a woman out at a Las Vegas last year who their company was looking to develop something. They were in the test and evaluation stage. I do not know if that product ever came to market. So right now there is not. And that's the other issue that is the legality piece of that is the level of THC in your system. You can have THC in your system and not be intoxicated and function normally, but if it shows up on a blood test for DUI, you are under the influence of marijuana. So the ability to set those levels, like driving under the influence is a 0.08, we can measure that. Pennsylvania knows it's the same for New Jersey or not, but we can measure that through blood work. Is okay at 0.08 we are intoxicated and cannot drive a car and be arrested for DUI. What is that level for THC? So that's right now problematic also, especially on the medicinal end. We can take a Percocet for pain possibly because I had a tooth extracted. That's going to affect me, maybe it's going to affect you differently. So I could be unable to drive safely with that one pill. Is what is that level of THC? As far as the statistics, I don't think we have seen a big rise.
Yeah, correct.
In accidents because of legalization. It's sort of like the crime statistic. We haven't seen crime go up around dispensaries in those areas also. So I don't know the specific numbers.
Yeah, so one of the challenges we have as an industry and state by state, local jurisdictions is how are you measuring intoxication when it comes to THC? To Jim's point, it could be in your system for many weeks, and you get into an accident, you get your blood test, you're testing positive for THC even though you haven't had anything for 3 or 4 weeks. So because all these different jurisdictions have different measurements and state by state and county by county in some instances, what we're seeing is that, because of these inconsistencies, this one group that came out was published last year in the Journal of Public Health. So the Journal of Public Health published a study last year, and what the study entailed was because of all these conflicting informations, these different, whether or not THC is a contributing factor or is there spikes, and if you're reading like the Denver Post, they had the other day, there's a 154% increase in traffic fatalities due to cannabis legalization. It's such an outrageous number that if that were the actual reality, the actual truth, Governor Hinkleover would shut the whole program down. We'd move away from it. So what this one study they looked at, they looked at Colorado and they looked at Washington, the first 2 states that legalized cannabis, and then they looked at 8 controlled states and states that have not legalized cannabis in any form whatsoever. They just wanted to see, let's take out all the reasons for a traffic fatality, whether I was texting while driving, intoxicated while driving, a dog jumped out in front of me while driving, whatever that reason was, they took away all those reasons. They just want to see, in Colorado and Washington compared to 8 controlled states, is there a spike? Is there something unusual? And there was no. There's no statistical difference between Colorado and Washington and these other states. What we are seeing in the national trend are traffic fatalities are going up nationally. But it has more to do with this than it has to do with anything else. So while we're updating our Facebook status and we're looking at, we're telling our kids we're going to be home a little bit late, all those things on our phone while driving, that's the number one cause for traffic fatality increases. So they looked at that, they eliminated all of the reasons, and they saw Colorado, Washington did not have a statistical difference in the other states.
Hi, my name is Anjali Baxi, I'm an attorney with Giordano, Halloran, and Ciesla, and I work in the healthcare practice group. So this question actually goes to whether there's any movement to include medicinal marijuana in the scope of the Cody law prohibitions that speak to the prohibition of physicians referring to healthcare services in which they have a financial interest. And it just seems like it's going to be regulated at some point, and I'm just curious to see whether there's been any thought to that, because doctors are usually the ones most restricted in these aspects.
I'll take a quick stat on that. I don't know all the specifics to your question, but I will tell you that in this round, for example, a medical marijuana doctor cannot own an interest in a cannabis dispensary for a period of 1 year since their last prescription. I think that's it's a 1 year prohibition. So, for this past round, for example, when all these applicants were trying to fill up a board of medical advisors, on an advisory stance with no ownership, that's fine. But if you actually have ownership into that application, you would be disqualified. So that's one instance that I'm aware of. Where is my? Oh, there we go.
Morning, my name is Ben Branch. I'm an attorney at Schaeferman Lake in Lawrenceville. My question is, in a lot of townships are now enacting ordinances that preclude marijuana from facilities from opening in their town or even from going through their town with any sort of marijuana products on you. I know some states like Colorado had various things where you wouldn't get funding if you did not permit, or you had an ordinance that precluded it, you wouldn't get into the funding from the sale of marijuana. As a legislator in New Jersey, you talked about anything with regard to those ordinances?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, we're a home rule state. So the one thing you don't do is mess around in New Jersey with home rule, meaning the rights for these municipalities to police themselves. Whether you disagree with it or not, we're more fans of the carrot than the stick approach on some of this. And stick can come in many different ways, but you're not going to see anything in the current statute to mandate or to invalidate any of those local ordinances. I think what you are going to see is a more carrot-like approach in the following manner. In addition to money that will flow out from the state back to these municipalities, for example, one of the issues that we're going to use to combat driving while intoxication is going to be the use of drug recognition experts. New Jersey has the most in the nation currently. We'll train more. And by the way, that's good policy because forget about cannabis for a second, but if you took Benadryl and you're on the road, or you on taking some sort of opioid pain medication, or happen to hit the NyQuil hard, because you got a chest cold or something, you're driving while intoxicated, and probably with the exception of NyQuil, which is alcohol based, you're not going to blow a breathalyzer that anyone's going to know. The drug recognition expert will know, though. So we need to train more of those. That shouldn't come from the municipal government. That'll come out of this pot of money, and that'll flow down. But as I said earlier, that's not enough for towns. You're going to allow to have a local tax on this now. That will be a pot sweetener for some of these towns. But if you don't allow it, you're not going to allow it in your town, you're not going to get that benefit. Here's the problem, though, that the Colorado Springs model. You're still going to have to deal with issues. You're going to have to deal with issues of enforcement. You're going to have to you can't stop it from flowing in your town. You can't arrest people if it's legal at the state level. You can pass local ordinances that won't allow smoking in public. And, just like you would do with a bar. You're not allowed to walk down Main Street with a bottle of beer either. So I think there will be some allowance for municipalities kind of police their own within some limits. But the incentive is, if you want this in your town, you're going to have job creation. You're going to have the benefit of potential research and development down the line. You're going to have increased tax revenue, or you're not. And I think right now, I'll tell you this. We were just joking before the panel started. For every town that tells me they're not going to do this, I can name 2 that will.
I mean, that's the reality. That's right.
And here's the thing, too, with Colorado. Colorado, when they first legalized in 2014, 70% of the towns in 2014 opted out. 70% of the Colorado towns opted out, and they did $1.5 billion in sales last year. In New Jersey, I don't know what the number is today, so they call it like 35 towns have opted out. So it's about there's 565 municipalities in New Jersey, so about 5% of the towns in New Jersey have opted out so far. That number will increase. We expect it to increase, and whether that number gets to 5%, 10%, 20%, whatever it is, we're going to be okay, guys. The Colorado Springs example that Bill mentioned, Colorado Springs opted out. They had the military academy there. It's a heavy military presence, and they're like, not my town. They did their own analysis. They lost $20 million of taxes to their surrounding communities who had those dispensaries there. Now they want to opt back in. So it's a whole different dynamic. Once you see that, hey, I didn't stop anything except for my municipality to benefit from this new industry. We have one last question.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Bernstein. I'm an attorney with Calzaretto and Bernstein. My question regarding the status of the development of regulations for testing labs. I represent a client that's an existing medical testing lab. They're interested in getting into this area, overlooking the financial and tax issues. What is the status of New Jersey regulatory development on testing laboratories?
There won't be any development, any regulations until there's a statutory change. The governor does not have the statutory authority to put out licenses on the third-party testing. What we'll see, I think, is in this next round of legislation that's coming due, there will be the authority given to the administration then to promulgate regs for that.
Because in Pennsylvania, they have just allowed
Yep.
two independent laboratories have been authorized and now up and running.
They have, and most jurisdictions that are doing this have independent testing. We will not be able to keep up the state. I think there's actually universal agreement among the legislature and the governor. That doesn't happen every day, folks. But on this issue, that there will be third-party lab testing.
How about the existing lab which has a DEA license and CDS license?
Now, there's no authority. There's no statutory authority to allow the state to allow you to test it. So there's not until the bill passes.
Correct. We actually have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Christine, and I work for a small community bank in South Jersey. I know there's a lot of questions about the banking industry. Our biggest challenge in the banking industry, of course, are the FinCEN regulations and the enormous amount of reporting they require from us. Part of the problem is we don't know what the expectations from the regulators are. Do you foresee FinCEN giving us more guidance, ability to validate these dispensaries and growing facilities That's part of our biggest challenge in jumping into this is where's our resources to validate this? Because they expect us to know everything that's going on with these businesses. It's going to be very intrusive. Like one of the panelists said that her bank kicked her out after a year. That's because they did not vet her properly. They didn't anticipate what her flow was going to be. They didn't ask her the right questions. So that's part of our challenge. When I saw a brochure here from the CPA firm, they answered a lot of questions right there, the reporting that they'll do for them. If these industries are willing to share that information with the banks, it will make it easier for them to do their job. So a lot of that is the awareness of what the banks need in order to facilitate what you guys need. So I guess my question is, do you foresee FinCEN giving us more tools or guidance, such as a website where we can validate these facilities like we do for money service businesses that have to register on the state level? Anything to that?
Sandy, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of see that it's kind of the onus is on the part of the bank. I know there are many cannabis entities and CPAs that have to sign NDAs, because the banks don't want it public knowledge that they're doing this. And there's obviously a lot of extra compliance works, with the SARS and so forth. Right now, I see it more as the responsibility of the bank, and if there's any way legally that, that it can be more lucrative for them with, that's why these secondary online virtual banks can charge these transactional fees, and they, substantiate that these fees, are there simply because of the extra work and load that's involved. I can't speak for any, regulatory changes and, what that environment may entail, but that the banks essentially have to do their own due diligence and ascertain what the scope of the extra work to be performed and if they can charge accordingly and if it's worthwhile for them. And maybe in the long run, in the aggregate, it very well might be. I mean, it's a lot of lost business, if not.
Okay, thank you all for your questions, and then we're going to wrap it up. And I'm just going to give thank you, good night. Wrap it up. We started with Bill. Sandy, why don't we just come down this way and just give if you have any last minute statements.
Well, for those of you that are new in the space in terms of cannabis touching entities, the cultivators, dispensaries, manufacturing, delivery, that will be legislated. Just to be very careful in terms of maybe seeking out a knowledgeable attorney and how to set up everything in terms of entities, if you're going to have multiple entities, and what might be the best entity. In particular, while there might be different tax considerations, there are certain entities like S-Corps, Schedule C, sole proprietors, partnership, LLCs, that flow through to your individual return, which means that you would be at the individual level responsible for the entity's tax, and it is more likely to get audited by the IRS simply because it's illegal at the federal end and it's a heavy cash-based business. So there's you bear the responsibility and risk as opposed to a C corporation. Heavy documentation. Try to utilize the proper methodology of accounting to afford yourself the maximum deductions. Because if not, there was a recent court case that the IRS will disallow it. The Alterman's case just a couple months ago proved that sloppy accounting and erroneous, methods, that they employed, resulted in additional tax penalties and interest. So to get all your ducks in a row beforehand will save you a lot of money and heartache in the long run.
Rosie?
My suggestion is to make sure that you have your SOPs in order. Make sure they're ready to go. That would be one of the first steps. when it comes to planning your business, talking with your banks, make sure you have your SOPs and your operational practices in place. Also, don't forget about we are retail, and we are selling a medicinal product. So you want to make sure that that product is a good product to release to the public. So make sure that you do your education with your patients as well. It's so important for them to understand what they're purchasing. And aside from just selling a product, we actually do a lot of education and outreach, and talking with your community and your doctors and educating them is also crucial in this realm, because it is it's an emerging industry. There's where we sit today will be so much different than what we see 5 years from now. So I'm excited to see that, and what happens legislatively, I think, is going to be very interesting, maybe this next election. So hopefully we can address some of the financial concerns when it comes to banking and regulation. Stay compliant as best you can. Make sure that you have a good POS system that documents everything that you do. Even if you are a cash business, your software system should be able to record everything that you need.
I'll make this short and sweet here. If you're just getting into the business, surround yourself now with subject matter experts that are knowledgeable in the cannabis industry. So important. Like I said, we saw a struggle through August with folks who were not prepared for this and tried to get stuff put together. The next round is coming. We don't know when, but start to develop everything now. And do your due diligence on those so-called experts too. We've seen folks get burned in the past with bringing somebody on board and they weren't who they said they were. So there's some due diligence on your part to when you're building that team.
George? Again, like I said before, always be proactive instead of reactive. Identify your business, have a plan for the business that works, and always real estate is a very unique product that can be useful in this space. And when you're identifying locations, there are opportunities out there for investment, capital seed money, depending on where you locate the venture. So once you've identified your model, you should look into all of those things which can help you launch if you're first time in the space of the business. But again, just got to be aware of the local surroundings. The business is going to be what it's going to be. And if you're proactive and engaged, we're really bullish on this being the next big economy in Jersey.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bill?
Just repeat what I said. For folks looking to get in sort of entry level or first time, what do you want to be and where you want to be, and nail those down. But for a different group here, we have some law firms, we have some sort of established businesses that are in our state that are probably looking at this for the first time. And I'll tell you what I told the shareholders. Archer is about the fourth or fifth largest law firm in the state of New Jersey. Mostly, every other area of law but cannabis. And we had just started a government affairs practice. But I addressed our shareholder board to say we need to be in this space a couple of years ago. And I got a lot of strange looks, or frankly, people not putting down the blackberries. But I got everyone's attention when I said this. Even if it's not new clients that we're going to represent, even if it's not the cannabis company that's coming in from Colorado, California, that we're going to represent, we have existing clients that are going to come to us and say, hey, I'm a bank. Hey, I'm a municipality. Hey, I'm a factory. I'm a warehouse company. We just got approached by a client that wants us to be in this space. Will you advise us? And if our answer is no, we're not only losing that deal, they're going to take the whole file and leave. Every single person looked up when I said that. You all have a built-in clientele in your existing clientele right now, and don't forget about them as well. Warehouse companies, real estate companies, banks, All are looking for a variety of different sources, looking for this type of advice and counsel. If you're a law firm, the banking side, you have existing clients. Warehouse companies, you're going to be in high demand. So there's a whole sector of the New Jersey economy that isn't necessarily in the cannabis space that can be in the cannabis space. Thanks for being here today.
Absolutely, and thank you, everybody. Look, you guys were told how many different times about surrounding yourself with the right team. Here's the right team right here. You got all the advice you ever wanted right here. So now we're going to invite our host back up.
Let's have a round of applause for our moderator and panel this morning. I think it's fair to say we'll be doing more of these panels next year, so please keep your eyes open. Coverage of this event will be available on our website this afternoon, in our weekly print edition, and also on our YouTube channel. Our next monthly panel discussion will be October 15th, right here at the Imperia. The topic is education. On that note, I want to wish you all a very good day, and thank you very much for coming.